Once again, this is a very exciting thing in the district. That's it, yeah. Oh, just play, or hit show or some, sorry, slideshow from the beginning. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an update to the technology plan. The formal technology plan document is being completed, but this is the information that will be included in there. So first, to talk about the overall technology strategy, where we're going, and this has been developed with pretty heavy teacher input and some parent input as well. We, at the elementary level, we'll be doing K through 2, we'll be doing iPads. At grade 3, the vast majority of schools have chosen to go Chromebooks, with the exception of Stratton and Thompson, which will be doing iPads with keyboards. In grades 4 and 5, all schools are doing Chromebooks. Thompson is going to also continue their iPad 1-to-1, but we are purchasing 4 Chromebook carts and for Thompson as well, and that is because we will be using a universal screener for English language arts and math at grades 4 and 5 that only runs on the Chromebooks, so they will have exposure to both devices. At the middle school, we'll be transitioning with the opening of Gibbs, the 6th grade, from 1-to-1 iPads to 1-to-1 Chromebooks. We'll be redeploying those iPads, as we'll be redeploying about 250 iPad 2s from Stratton to kindergartens at 3 schools. We'll be utilizing BYOD and school devices to try to get closer to 1-to-1 for grades 7 and 8. We'll be increasing our computer science offerings, and Mr. Coleman talked about that earlier when he gave the update on the math and the computer science curriculum. We'll be continuing to expand our use of Google Classroom. We'll also be running a boot camp for parents and students who are entering into either a 1-to-1 for the first time in grade 6 or BYOD for the first time, or any parent that their child is doing BYOD in the summertime, so that parents can come up to speed with how a student can use the device to help their educational progress. At the high school, we'll continue to utilize BYOD and school devices to get closer to 1-to-1. We're increasing our STEM offerings, and we've hired a full-time makerspace teacher who will be working with other teachers to really kind of flesh out that program. You heard again when Mr. Coleman was here about how we're going to be expanding our computer science offerings, and we're going to continue to expand the use of Google Classroom. This just gives you a little bit of an idea about how the money is going to be spent. We have about $425,000, give or take a little bit, from capital that's committed to us again this year, and approximately $300K that comes from the construction budgets for Thompson and Stratton in order to make purchases. These purchases are in line with the strategies that you've seen before. Because Stratton is a 1-to-1 school, they'll also be getting new ceiling-mounted projectors and sound system in all their schools. The new classrooms that are opening up in Thompson will be done in just like the classrooms that are already there. And this talks about the licenses for iReady, which will be our universal screener that we'll be implementing. We piloted that this year in Bishop and in Pierce, and we'll be expanding it to all the schools for the fall. Middle school, again, is getting some additional devices because of Capital Committee. We have additional devices for teachers at the middle school, and we'll also be using the iReady universal screener for the math support classes. One thing I should mention is that the teachers at the elementary school that are scheduled for a refresh of their device, with the exception of Stratton because they have a construction budget, and Thompson, the couple of new classrooms that are there, those are the only exceptions to this. Teachers will now be getting a Chromebook, a brand new Chromebook that has a touch screen and a camera that's front facing, and an iPad. And instead of getting a MacBook, the choice of that provides all the functionality. We've tested everything from easy IEP to printing to, every aspect of what students are, what teachers need to do to support students. But they will retain their MacBook until it dies. We will not be replacing hard drives. We will not be replacing cards. If there's a cracked screen, it won't be replaced. This allows for a couple things. It allows teachers to make the transition between the old devices and the new devices with less anxiousness. It also allows our tech department to make sure that they get all the bugs out of the printing that's going to be, because right now kids and teachers cannot print with Chromebooks. They cannot print with iPads. Coming in the fall, teachers will not only be able to print with iPads and Chromebooks, but they actually will be able to print with their phones too. So any mobile device will be able to use what we call follow you printing, which means that if I'm in any building in the district, I can print to the computer, to a printer in that district I send it to print to follow you, and then I take my card if I had it around my neck, you'd see it. There we go, like that one. And I put it on the card reader on the printer, and then I say release all, and it releases all my jobs. So especially this is very important for coaches, for literacy specialists, for curriculum directors, for principals, for teachers. When they do PD together with teachers in other buildings, they're able to print there. The high school will get some additional Chromebook carts, and there will be a replacement. Because the high school is so big, we have to replace their teacher devices in a rolling fashion. So 40 of the teacher devices at the high school will be replaced this year, and then we'll be providing some assisted technology devices upgraded for 50 students. So technology support. As usual, as we do every year, we'll be running our Summer Tech University. Our summer curriculum work also involves incorporating technology. The first day that the teachers are back at the elementary level, they will actually be trained on the iReady Universal Screener, and we have the company that makes that screener coming in several times during the fall and spring to work with teachers in interpreting the data. We have some additional staffing at Audison. We have a teacher who's currently part-time instructional technology support, part-time teaching computer science or digital modeling. She's going to be moving to full-time instructional technology support. And we'll be adding a .2 teacher for an 8th grade computer science elective. This says increase internet capacity to 250 meg pipes. That's actually incorrect. I talked to the technical staff today, and we're going to actually have 2 gig pipes starting in the fall. The interesting part about that is that right now we're paying $3,200 for what we have a month, and we're going to be paying $3,600. So we're doubling our capacity and only going up by $400 a month. And that was through a competitive bid process. So as we look, when you see the final document for the technology plan, it only goes up to FY19, and I'll explain why in a second. In FY19, we have the remaining funding committed in the neighborhood of $400K, and we'll have some Gibbs construction budget. It's my recommendation to the person who takes over this position that we replace the outdated projectors at 5 of the elementaries and Audison at least, and possibly the high school as long as they're not installed in the ceilings. Right now we're in the 3rd year of paying a lease payment of $90,000 for iPads that were on a lease. That will be concluded at the end of this year, and that $90,000 I'm recommending be used to replace projectors. We have a number of projectors across the district that are actually VGA and not HDMI compatible. So we need to move to and they also are projectors that the bulb costs almost as much as the projector, so we need to move to a cheaper design. We'll be continuing to replace the teacher devices at the Audison and at the high school. We'll be purchasing one-to-one Chromebooks for Gibbs and outfitting Gibbs classrooms with the state-of-the-art projector and sound systems. And hopefully we'll be creating digital modeling classes at Gibbs. So that's all the good news. Concerns for the future. The level of instructional technology support is below the level that's needed in order to really make the use of technology support transformational. We have and also next year, we just were made aware of this today, that not only will English language arts and math be expected to be tested in a digital format next year for MCAS, but science at grades 5 and 8 is moving to digital for next year. So every grade, save grade 3 through 8, so 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, would be testing online, and the team made the decision today that if we're going to do that, we might as well just do grade 3 and do grades 3 through 8 all online. So we have a stopgap measure. It's a lot of work, prep work to do. So we have a stopgap measure that we're looking into where we sort of stipend a teacher at each building of the elementary schools in grades 3, 4, or 5 to sort of be the lead teacher for MCAS and online testing, and also technology in that building so that the instructional technology staff can really take the heavy hitters. So those lead teachers would be sort of like tier 1, and the instructional technology staff would be tier 2 and tier 3. There's no committed funding from the capital committee after FY19. At the time that they committed to us, they gave us a 5-year commitment of $400,000 plus or minus 20,000, not minus, plus 20,000 per year, and that the last year of that 5-year commitment is FY19. The computer science labs at the high school, the digital art and the digital media labs, music labs at the high school will need to be updated in FY19, and there's not sufficient funding for that at this point. We have, for example, at Stratton, we have 10 carts of iPad 2s, about 250 iPads, that I said before, we're going to be moving to kindergartens across the district, but they will not be able to run the most current version of the OS, the operating system for iPads, as of September 2017. We'll be able to keep using them, but we won't be able to put new versions of apps on them, and if something goes wrong, Apple's going to pretty much wash their hands of it. And the level of technical support for full district online MCAS is below what would be ideal, and I talked about how we're going to, we have a plan to get through next year, but we'll have to look at that over time. So that's the update.
Question, Mr. Hayner.
Grade 3, you said some of the schools, they have the choice of either Chromebooks or iPads.
Yes.
They have similar software?
Most of the apps run on both of them, yes.
Okay, I'm just looking for consistency in the programming and stuff. So is there any issue with that?
I don't feel that there's any problem, and I want teachers to have us get what they will most likely use. And so if teachers at 3rd grade feel really strongly that they want iPads, I think that we should continue to do that. The cost differential has completely dropped. Right. That used to be one of our biggest concerns, and Apple came out with a new iPad that's $294, and the Chromebooks that we're looking at right now are about $300, so yeah, it's the same thing.
If I may, just one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
The iPad 2s, you said won't run the new operating system.
Correct.
They won't, they're not, they can't run it at all?
They cannot run it at all.
So, okay, thank you.
Dr. Garcia.
About the Chromebooks, a couple questions. First, are the ones that we're getting, like for the Gibbs for kids, are they going to have the touch screen?
Yes.
Okay.
And they also have what's called a forward-facing camera, so that
Okay.
means that you can see what you're taking a picture of. Right now, you can't. On the older ones, you cannot.
Okay. So when we went to having the iPads in the 6th grade, we rolled it out, first for a cluster and then so we did a pilot. Have we done any kind of comparable pilot with the Chromebooks?
Yeah, we've been using them at 7th and 8th grade.
Okay.
So we haven't been using them at 6th grade. Actually, 6th grade took the MCAS on Chromebooks this year.
Okay.
And they had no problem moving from one device to the other.
Okay, thank you.
Just one quick question and then another question, more complicated question. So are we then doing all the testing on Chromebooks? Is that where? That's okay.
With the exception of Thompson.
Okay.
Thompson and Stratton, we didn't test third grade online this year, we only did
Right.
fourth grade. So Stratton, if those students have one-to-one iPads with keyboards, which is what we're ordering for them, so that's actually slightly
So they're
more
more
expensive
comfortable with the
because it's
iPads.
$294 plus $100 for the keyboard. So that means that every student that is used to using a keyboard, and even at Thompson, we bring in keyboards for them. So there's no student that's taking the MCAS without a keyboard unless they want to. I mean, there are plenty of students that unplug them and say, I don't need it, and would
Right.
prefer not to use it, but that's available to them.
Great. And then the other question, I have two kids, one is in 7th grade and one is in 10th grade, and both diligently brought their devices for the first few weeks, and then their teachers were never using them, and they said, why am I carrying this extra weight around? And so, and I know 6th grade is very comfortable with it, but 7th and 8th weren't ready. Do teachers, I know you've talked to teachers, do they feel more comfortable now with the bring your own device sort of
I'm going to look at
approach?
Mr. Levy, and I don't want to put words in their mouth. What would you say?
I feel teachers are becoming more comfortable. It just takes time. I remember when we first had access to an iPad card, the first year that I had it, I didn't use it as much because it took more time for training, and it just took time to get used to because it is changing not just teaching style, but a lot of lesson plans and everything. So over time, and then if it's not one-to-one but bring your own device, teachers became more comfortable with students, or becoming more comfortable with students completing assignments with different methods, whether it's on computer, whether it's with paper.
Yeah, so I would, that's my take too, but I didn't want to put words into his mouth. I also think that by increasing the amount of instructional technology support at the middle school and by running a boot camp before school starts for students, so that students can know, how can I use this to better organize myself? And parents can know, how can students use this to better organize themselves? And this will be...
Teachers have to be okay with it. They have to allow it in the classroom.
Right,
Yeah.
I've had that
Yeah,
conversation
yeah.
with the administrative team, so I think we're all set there.
Yeah, okay, cool, thanks.
So just a comment for your successor and for Dr. Bodie. I do think, though, at the high school particularly, but also at the middle school, that we need a plan to go to one-to-one, BYOD and one-to-one, because there was a huge difference going from 6th grade, where it was one-to-one, and iPads were used every day, not in every class every day, but they were used by our students every day, to these carts that might get used, once every couple of weeks. It's just, and then so those carts aren't really even being used very much. So I know we need them for the testing, but we've got to find a way to get to one-to-one. And, there are other policies, where you have to buy the computer for high school for the, $300 for 4 years, I think is very reasonable. People are going to be willing to do that. But we need to come up with a plan, go to capital committee for the iPads, for the Chromebooks that we need for people that can't afford them, and get there somehow.
So I would agree with you that teachers are more inclined to use them if every student has one. Then they don't have to worry about, I'm using them today, I'm not. They can, at the spur of the moment, say, oh, okay, take out your device and do X, Y, or Z. I totally agree with that. I just want to say that I'm not quite sure that those carts, I'm absolutely sure that those carts are not sitting there and not being used, because there's been a slight problem with the network in the grade 8 section of the building, and I've been getting enough telephone calls and email to know that people are waiting to use them and they need us to resolve this network issue that they're working on right now. So when the network is down, is when we hear a lot, and we hear a lot of complaints, and teachers are having to change lesson plans, et cetera. So I would say that the utilization is probably higher than we would be afraid that it wouldn't be, and it's not as much as we would like. And I think that that's really attributable to whether it's one-to-one or not. And I think you're totally right about that. And,
I would add that there's been a lot of pressure for the high school administration to use their budget to buy more. And in fact, we simply don't have the money to buy all the Chromebooks that they would like to have at the high school.
Sorry, I was just to Len's point, I think parents would be willing, if they can afford it, and not everyone can, of course, to buy the devices and make them available to their kids if they really genuinely felt that they were being used consistently and it wasn't just an extra, weight to carry around. So I think that is messaging that we can tell the community, and I think people, if they knew that that was an expectation, that if you can afford it, that this is something we need you to do, I think they would.
Kirsty?
I had a couple follow-up questions. So do you think that part of the problem of teachers not using as much is the problem that you talked about, the lack of instructional technical support?
I think that's part of it. I also think that, as we talked about, if they don't have one-to-one, then it doesn't become part of their day. And I think that that really rapidly became part of the sixth grade day. And so every classroom where we've put one-to-one, Thompson, I mean, those teachers were not any more technologically astute than any other school in the district, but they had them in there. They could go to them anytime, and elementary teachers tend to roll a little bit.
And
Well,
then,
Can I add a comment to that? One thing that was very instructive to me is when we had that meeting with sixth grade teachers and deciding what they were going to have, they made a very interesting point, that they would prefer to have exactly the same devices as the students, so that they would know, when they do design the lesson, basically what the student experience would be. So to your question about BYOD, I have wondered since then whether that may actually be a little bit of an impediment when you have different kinds of devices that come in and you're doing a lesson on a MacBook, or you're doing it can perhaps get in the way of a sort of a consistent approach to it. I think it's something we need to figure out a little bit more in the high school about this. And then there's that transition point where's the inflection point from when it really makes sense to when it doesn't? And I think there's more transitioning to use of technology is growing very quickly. I think it's growing faster than we even expected, but are we at that point where,
Makes sense to
people would
bring
feel
it.
it was worth the investment? I'm not sure yet.
Yeah.
the other question I had was, if I understood you right, you said there was going to be a parent boot camp for tech?
For parents and
So
their students
that-
together.
That sounds really nice, and
It
it
does.
might be nice, let people know ahead of time,
Yep.
and also solicit questions from them for things to cover. For example, what do you do if your student says, I can't find my work anywhere? And, the different places you can look and stuff like that, because
Sure.
it took, I would have to go to my older daughter to help my younger daughter. And not everyone is equipped with the
I know.
older person, so.
We'll have to come up with some
Older
FAQs.
teenager.
Yeah, but ask people what problems they've had.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is something you're going to plan for when?
Joanna Bradley, who is the instructional technology specialist for Audison, is going to be running it right before school starts. We find that that's generally where we get people more likely to come, when it's like, a week before school starts and reality hits that school's going to start and people have to know what they're going to do with their device and stuff. So.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going